First contact confusion. The crystalline walls of the research station hummed with a gentle vibration as Dr. Nora Harrison adjusted her microscope. The alien atmosphere outside cast a perpetual purple twilight through the reinforced windows, but inside, the laboratory maintained Earth-standard conditions. That is, until today's experiment. Adjusting environmental controls to match Lemnian physiology, Nora spoke into her recorder. Temperature dropping to 15 degrees Celsius, humidity to 10%. The air grew crisp, reminding her of autumn mornings back in Colorado. Her research partner would arrive any minute. After 3 months of careful preparation, this would be the first direct interaction between a human scientist and a Lemnian researcher without protective barriers. The preliminary studies showed no biological incompatibilities, but theory and practice were often very different things. A soft chime announced her visitor's arrival. The laboratory door dilated open, revealing a tall, willowy figure whose skin seemed to shimmer with internal light. Rhiannon, as she had chosen to be called in human language, moved with liquid grace into the room. Her large, opalescent eyes studied everything with intense curiosity. "Greetings, Dr. Harrison," Rhiannon's translator converted her melodic tones into English. "Your atmospheric adjustments are most thoughtful." "Please, call me Nora," she smiled, trying to keep her excitement professional. "I hope the settings are comfortable." "Most suitable." Rhiannon approached the workstation, her head tilting as she observed Nora's face. "Though I notice your optical organs are producing liquid. Is this a sign of distress?" Nora touched her cheek, surprised to find tears of joy had begun forming. She laughed softly. "No, not distress. Sometimes humans produce tears when we're happy or excited. It's an emotional response." Rhiannon's skin pulsed with a soft blue light. What Nora had learned indicated fascination. "Fascinating. Your species releases moisture as a response to neural stimulation? How do you prevent cellular dehydration?" "Our bodies produce tears constantly, actually. It's necessary to keep our eyes healthy. We just produce more when we're emotional," Nora explained, reaching for a tissue. "It's completely normal. Your species willingly expends water resources for emotional expression." Rhiannon's translator couldn't quite capture the mix of horror and wonder in her harmonic tones. "On my world, water is considered precious. We evolved to conserve every molecule." This was exactly the kind of cultural exchange Nora had hoped for. "That makes sense, given your planet's arid climate. How do your people express strong emotions?" Rhiannon's skin rippled with patterns of light, creating a mesmerizing display. "Through bioluminescence. Each pattern and color has specific meaning. What you're seeing now indicates scientific excitement and cultural curiosity." As they began their scheduled experiments, Nora found herself repeatedly distracted by Rhiannon's beautiful light displays. The Lemnians seemed equally fascinated by every human physiological response, from goosebumps to laughter. "Your epidermis alters texture in response to temperature variation," Rhiannon observed, watching Nora's arm. "Yet another example of your species' remarkable environmental adaptability." "We're full of surprises," Nora grinned, then sneezed suddenly. The unexpected sound made Rhiannon leap backward, her skin flashing brilliant white in alarm. "Are you experiencing systematic failure?" Rhiannon's voice trembled with concern. "Just a sneeze, another normal human function. Dust irritated my nasal passages," Nora explained, trying not to laugh at her partner's dramatic reaction. "We expel air forcefully to clear them." "Your species is remarkably explosive," Rhiannon observed, her colors slowly returning to normal. "How do you maintain bodily integrity with so many involuntary expulsions?" The day continued with similar moments of discovery and misunderstanding, each one building a stronger bridge between their worlds. By the time they concluded their first session, Nora's notebook was filled with observations about Lemnian biology, and Rhiannon had compiled an impressive list of alarming yet fascinating human bodily functions. As Rhiannon prepared to leave, she paused at the door. "Nora, may I make a personal observation?" "Of course." "Despite your species' seemingly chaotic biological processes, there is a remarkable efficiency to your design. Perhaps what we initially perceived as wasteful is actually beautiful, in its own way." Nora felt tears welling up again, and this time, she didn't try to hide them. "Thank you, Rhiannon. That means a lot to me." "Ah, more emotional moisture." Rhiannon's skin sparkled with delight. "I look forward to our next session. There is clearly much more to learn about each other." As the door closed behind her alien colleague, Nora smiled, wiping her eyes. First Contact had gone better than she could have hoped. Tomorrow would bring new discoveries, new misunderstandings, and new opportunities to bridge the gap between their worlds. A bridge between worlds. 2 weeks into their collaboration, Nora found herself in the Luminian quarter of the research station, surrounded by ethereal architecture that seemed to pulse with its own inner light. Rhiannon had invited her to participate in a traditional knowledge-sharing ceremony, something rarely offered to outsiders. The Chamber of Resonance operates on principles your scientists might call quantum entanglement, Rhiannon explained, leading Nora through corridors that responded to their presence with subtle shifts in color. Though that's a simplification of the process. The chamber itself took Nora's breath away. The circular room was lined with crystals that seemed to capture and amplify the bioluminescence of its occupants. As other Luminians entered, their combined light created complex, overlapping patterns that danced across the walls. "It's beautiful," Nora whispered, then noticed tears forming again. She reached for a tissue, but Rhiannon gently stopped her. "Please, let them flow," the alien scientist said. "We've been studying your emotional moisture. It contains trace elements that resonate with our bioluminescent frequencies. We believe it might enhance the ceremony." Nora blinked in surprise. "You've been analyzing my tears?" "Just as you've been analyzing our light patterns," Rhiannon's skin rippled with amusement. "Scientific curiosity works both ways, dear friend." The ceremony began as more Luminians took their places in a circle. Their combined glow created intricate patterns that seemed to tell stories without words. Nora found herself moved to tears by the beauty of it, and noticed how the crystals seemed to shine brighter where her tears fell. Suddenly, the patterns shifted dramatically. A Luminian elder, their skin bearing complex patterns that spoke of great age and wisdom, stepped forward. "Something unprecedented is occurring," they announced, their translator struggling to convey the musical complexity of their language. "The human's emotional response is creating new resonance patterns we've never observed before." The chamber's light show had become more intense, incorporating new colors that seemed to pulse in sync with Nora's heartbeat. She felt a strange connection to everyone in the room, as if her emotions were somehow being translated into their bioluminescent language. "This is remarkable," Rhiannon moved closer, her own light patterns synchronizing with the display. "Your tears aren't just water, Nora. They carry emotional information our systems can read. You're actually communicating in our language without realizing it." The discovery sent ripples of excitement through the Luminian scientific community. What had started as a simple cultural exchange was becoming a breakthrough in interspecies communication. However, not everyone was thrilled about this development. "The Council of Elders has concerns," Rhiannon informed Nora the next day in their lab. "Some fear this level of emotional integration could be dangerous. Our species has evolved to maintain careful control over our emotional displays. The raw intensity of human feelings." She paused, her skin showing patterns of uncertainty. "They're afraid we're too volatile?" Nora asked, understanding dawning. "Because we can't control our emotional responses the way you can?" "Some are, yes. But others, myself included, see tremendous potential. Your species' emotional openness, what some call weakness, might be exactly what we need. Our rigid control has led to stagnation in certain areas of our development. Before Nora could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Red emergency lights pulsed in a way that made the Lemnian skin flare with distress patterns. "What's happening?" Nora asked, moving to a console. "Long-range sensors have detected something approaching our system." Rhiannon's patterns shifted to what Nora had learned to recognize as fear. Something that absorbs light rather than reflects or emits it. Something that shouldn't exist. The station's main display activated, showing a massive object moving through space. It appeared as a void against the star field, consuming all light that touched it. Traditional sensors couldn't get a reading on it. "The Void Eaters," Rhiannon whispered, her light patterns becoming erratic. "We thought they were just legends. Stories to frighten children about creatures that consume light itself." Nora watched the sensor readings with growing concern. "Whatever it is, it's heading straight for us. And it's big enough to swallow this entire station. Our weapons, our defenses, everything is based on light manipulation." Rhiannon's voice carried an edge of panic. "Against something that devours light." "Then maybe we need something else," Nora said, an idea forming. "Something they won't expect." "Rhiannon, what if we combined our abilities? Your light manipulation and our emotional energy?" The Lemnian's patterns shifted to show intrigue. "The resonance patterns from the ceremony, if we could replicate that on a larger scale." "Exactly. They might be able to eat light, but can they handle light infused with human emotions?" As they rushed to bring their idea to the council, Nora realized that what had started as a simple study of tears might become their best hope for survival. The very emotional responses that some Lemnians had feared might prove to be their salvation. The impending storm. The central command center of the research station buzzed with activity as Lemnian scientists worked alongside their human counterparts. Holographic displays showed the approaching void entity, now close enough to block out entire star systems in their sensors. Nora stood before the Council of Elders, her heart racing as she explained their theory. "The emotional resonance we discovered isn't just about communication. When human tears interact with your crystals, they create new forms of energy we've never seen before." "Preposterous," Elder Varix's skin pulsed with skeptical patterns. "Emotions are abstract concepts. They cannot generate physical power." Rhiannon stepped forward, her own patterns showing determination. "I can prove otherwise." She gestured to the experimental chamber they'd hastily constructed. "Dr. Harrison, would you assist me?" Nora entered the chamber with Rhiannon, where specially modified crystals surrounded them. The crystals were similar to those used in the resonance chamber but reconfigured based on their recent discoveries. "Think about everything we could lose," Rhiannon whispered. "Let yourself feel it fully." Nora didn't have to try hard. The thought of this beautiful civilization being consumed by darkness, of losing her friend and all they discovered together, brought immediate tears to her eyes. As they fell, the crystals began to pulse with unprecedented intensity. The chamber's energy readings spiked dramatically. Where Lemnian light typically registered as pure and singular in wavelength, this new energy was complex, layered, and far more powerful than anything they'd seen before. "Impossible," Elder Varix moved closer to the readings. "The output is orders of magnitude beyond our standard amplification systems." "Not impossible," Nora said, wiping her eyes. "Just different. Your species evolved to control emotions, to conserve energy. Humans evolved to express them, to release energy. When we combine these approaches, we create something entirely new," Rhiannon finished. Her skin patterns shifted to match the complex energy signature they'd generated. "And the Void Eaters won't be prepared for it." The next hours were a blur of activity. Engineers worked to modify the station's defense grid, incorporating the new crystals into their systems. Each crystal was carefully calibrated to resonate with both Luminian light and human emotional energy. The entity will be within range in 6 hours, the station's tactical officer reported. We're receiving transmissions from the surface. Several Luminian cities have gone dark. Nora watched the feeds with horror as patches of the planet's bioluminescent civilization winked out one by one. The Void Eaters weren't just absorbing light, they were consuming the very essence of Luminian life. We need more power, Rhiannon said, studying the defense grid modifications. The emotional resonance is strong, but to protect the entire planet. She trailed off, her patterns showing deep thought. What if we linked everyone? Nora suggested. Not just me, but all the humans on the station. And not just fear and sadness, but everything, joy, hope, love, anger. The full spectrum of human emotion. The idea sparked a flurry of activity. Calls went out to every human on the station, explaining the plan. Within hours, the modified resonance chamber was packed with volunteers, each connected to the crystal network. Remember, Nora addressed the gathered humans, don't try to control your emotions. That's not our strength. Feel them, express them, let them flow naturally. The Luminians will handle the technical aspects of converting that energy. As the Void entity entered the outer defense perimeter, they initiated the system. The chamber filled with tears, laughter, and every human emotion in between. The Luminians, stationed at crystal control panels throughout the room, began to glow with increasing intensity as they channeled and amplified the emotional energy. The combined power was staggering. The defense grid lit up with colors never before seen in this sector of space. Where the Void entity touched this new energy field, it recoiled as if burned. It's working. Rhiannon's patterns shifted rapidly between amazement and joy. The emotional resonance is too complex for them to absorb. They can't break it down fast enough. But their victory celebration was premature. The Void entity, though unable to consume their defense field directly, began to change shape. It spread out, trying to flow around their defenses, seeking weak points. We need more. Nora shouted, seeing the strain on both humans and Luminians as they tried to maintain the energy field. Everyone, think about what we're protecting. Not just ourselves, but everything we've built here. The friendship between our species, the discoveries we've made, the future we could have together. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Humans throughout the chamber began to cry harder, laugh louder, shout their defiance at the darkness. The Luminians' glow intensified until it was almost blinding, their patterns mixing and flowing together in completely new configurations. The Void entity continued to press against their defenses, but now something unexpected was happening. Where the emotional energy field touched the Void, tiny points of light began to appear within the darkness. Like stars being born in empty space, these lights grew and multiplied. The readings are off the scale, one of the human scientists reported. Whatever that thing is, our emotions aren't just blocking it, they're changing it. Tears of hope. The command center fell silent as they watched the transformation occurring before them. The Void entity, once a perfect darkness that devoured light, now sparkled with countless points of illumination, like a new galaxy being born from nothingness. The emotional resonance isn't just affecting its surface, Rhiannon observed, her skin patterns shifting rapidly as she analyzed the data. It's restructuring the entity at a quantum level. Look at these readings. Nora studied the complex data streams, her scientific mind racing to understand what they were seeing. It's as if our emotions are teaching it how to generate light rather than consume it. We're not destroying it, we're changing its fundamental nature. The Void entity's transformation accelerated. Areas that had been pure darkness began to pulse with colors that matched the emotional energy field. Fear became deep purple swirls, joy manifested as brilliant gold sparkles, and love created patterns of warm, rose-colored light that spread like ripples through space. The cities, someone shouted. On the planetary feeds, the darkened Lemnian settlements were beginning to glow again, but differently than before. Where their light had once been controlled and uniform, now it danced with human-like emotional variations. Elder Varix approached Nora, his usual skeptical patterns replaced with something more complex. In all our history, we sought to master our emotions, to contain and control them. We saw them as a weakness to be overcome. But now, he gestured to the displays. Now we see that true strength lies in embracing them, not suppressing them. The transformed void entity began to move again, but not with its previous menace. It approached the station slowly, its newly generated light pulsing in patterns that seemed almost communicative. Rhiannon gasped as she interpreted them. "It's trying to talk to us," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "The patterns, they're a mixture of our light language and emotional resonance. It's saying it was empty. Hungry. It consumed light because it had none of its own. But now it understands creation instead of consumption," Nora finished, wiping fresh tears from her eyes. These weren't tears of fear or even joy, but of profound understanding. Each droplet that fell onto the crystal controls created new ripples of light that the entity mimicked in space. The next few hours brought more surprises. As the transformed entity continued to communicate, they learned it wasn't alone. More void entities were out there, all driven by the same emptiness, the same hunger for light. But now they had a way to help them. "We could create a network," Rhiannon suggested, her patterns showing excitement. "Combine your emotional resonance chambers with our long-range communication arrays. We could reach out to other void entities before they attack, offer them transformation instead of conflict." The Human Lemnian Research Station became a beacon, broadcasting its message of transformation across space. The transformed void entity joined their efforts, its new light carrying their signal even further than their technology alone could reach. But the most profound changes were happening closer to home. The Lemnian civilization, exposed to the full spectrum of human emotions through their defensive network, was beginning to evolve. Their rigid control was giving way to more nuanced expression. Light patterns that had once been standardized began to show individual variations, reflecting personal feelings rather than just communal messages. "Your tears," Elder Varix said to Nora during a council session, "have washed away centuries of emotional suppression. Our children now glow with colors we never knew existed within us." The humans, too, were changing. Prolonged exposure to Lemnian light patterns had enhanced their emotional awareness. They found themselves able to read subtle feelings in each other's expressions that they'd never noticed before, developing an almost Lemnian-like sensitivity to emotional energy. "We're becoming something new," Nora told Rhiannon as they watched a group of human and Lemnian children playing together. The children's laughter created bursts of light that danced through the air, a perfect blend of human joy and Lemnian luminescence. Not just coexisting, but growing together. Rhiannon's patterns shifted to show agreement, but also concern. "The Council is still debating the implications. Such rapid cultural evolution carries risks. Some fear we might lose what makes us uniquely Lemnian." "Change doesn't mean loss," Nora assured her, reaching out to take her friend's hand. Where their skin touched, a soft glow emerged, neither purely human nor Lemnian, but something wonderfully new. "It means growth. Look at the void entity, it didn't stop existing when it learned to create light. It became more than it was." The transformed entity, now a constant presence in their sky, pulsed with agreeing patterns. Its light had stabilized into something that combined the precision of Lemnian communication with the warmth of human emotion. It had become living proof that change, even the most fundamental kind, could lead to something beautiful. Unity in diversity. 1 year after the void entity's transformation, the research station had evolved into something far beyond its original purpose. The once sterile corridors now pulsed with a blend of human and Lemnian life, walls embedded with emotion-sensitive crystals that responded to the feelings of those who passed by. Nora stood at the observation deck, watching the transformed void entity, now known as the Light Weaver, creating spectacular auroras in the planet's atmosphere. Its massive form had become a symbol of change, a living monument to the power of combining different species' strengths. The latest data from the transformation network is remarkable, Rhiannon said, joining her at the window. Her light patterns displayed excitement tinged with pride. 3 more void entities have responded to our broadcast. They're already showing signs of internal illumination. And the emotional feedback? Nora asked, turning to face her friend. After a year of close collaboration, she could read Rhiannon's patterns almost as easily as human expressions. Even more interesting. Each entity develops its own unique emotional light signature. They're not just copying our patterns, they're creating their own emotional language. The station's main hall had been converted into a grand chamber where humans and Lemnians gathered for what they now called the resonance sessions. These daily meetings combined meditation, emotional expression, and light manipulation in ways that would have seemed impossible a year ago. During today's session, young Lemnians practiced expressing emotions through their light patterns while human children learned to focus and direct their emotional energy. The air sparkled with their combined efforts, human tears of joy creating rainbow refractions through Lemnian light patterns. "Remember when you first saw me cry?" Nora asked Rhiannon as they watched the children practice. "You thought I was malfunctioning. And now we understand that what appears to be weakness in one context can be strength in another." Rhiannon's patterns shifted to show affectionate amusement. "Just as our rigid control, which you initially found cold, had its own purpose." Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent message from the council chamber. When they arrived, they found both human and Lemnian leaders gathered around a holographic display showing a distant sector of space. "We've detected something new," Elder Varix announced, his patterns showing cautious concern. "Not a void entity, but something else. Something that neither absorbs nor emits light, but rather bends it in ways we've never seen." The hologram showed a massive structure moving through space, its surface rippling like liquid metal. As they watched, it changed colors and patterns in response to their observation, almost like it was trying to mimic their combined light signatures. "A mimic entity," one of the human scientists suggested. "But is it hostile?" "Perhaps that's the wrong question," Nora said, studying the strange phenomenon. "Maybe, like the void entities, it's trying to communicate in the only way it knows how. We should respond with both light and emotion, show it all the ways we've learned to connect." The council agreed, and preparations began immediately. The Light Weaver, still orbiting their planet, offered to help transmit their message. Its vast form could project both Lemnian light patterns and human emotional resonance across incredible distances. As they prepared the transmission, Nora reflected on how far they'd come. What had started with a simple misunderstanding about tears had led to a completely new way of seeing the universe. Every strange encounter, every apparent threat, became an opportunity for growth and understanding. The combined message was the most complex they'd ever attempted. Humans channeled the full spectrum of their emotions: joy, fear, hope, love, wonder, while Lemnians translated these feelings into intricate light patterns. The Light Weaver amplified and transmitted this emotional light show across space. The response was immediate and astonishing. The mimic entity's surface erupted in a dazzling display that combined aspects of human emotion, Lemnian light patterns, and something entirely its own, a new form of communication that suggested possibilities they hadn't even imagined. "It's beautiful," Rhiannon whispered, her patterns matching the complex display. "Each new species we encounter adds another layer to our understanding. Another way of seeing, feeling, being. That's the real breakthrough, isn't it?" Nora said, watching as humans and Lemnians worked together to decode the mimic entity's response. "Not just learning to accept our differences, but discovering how those differences make us stronger together." The observation deck filled with others coming to watch the extraordinary light show. Human children sat with young Lemnians, their combined wonder creating subtle patterns in the crystal walls. The light weaver pulsed overhead, its transformed being a constant reminder of how far they'd come. "You know," Nora said, feeling the familiar sting of joyful tears in her eyes, "I never thought my tendency to cry would help save a civilization and transform our understanding of the universe." Rhiannon's patterns showed deep affection as she replied, "And I never thought our rigid control of emotions would help humans channel their feelings more effectively. Life, it seems, has a way of finding balance." As they stood together watching the mimic entities display, Nora realized that this wasn't just a happy ending, it was a beginning. Each new discovery, each strange new being they encountered, offered another chance to grow, to learn, to combine their strengths in new ways. The tears that had once confused Rhiannon now created beautiful patterns in the station's crystal walls, a permanent reminder that what makes us different can also make us stronger. And somewhere in the vast darkness of space, more void entities were discovering their own inner light, while unknown beings waited to share their unique ways of seeing the universe. The greatest discovery, they had learned, wasn't just finding life among the stars, it was finding new ways to live, to feel, to shine together.